I have a question for you all. Maybe we can discuss that a little bit if you like. You know, I also have some years in IoT behind myself, and just as I told some guys earlier on, I've actually booked my stand at IoT Solution World Congress 2024 in May already, so you will be invited if you'd like to join me. I get a lot of questions these days about from corporates who have been quite early on trying to do things and build things and deploy things in IoT in their companies, and now they have the question: now we're going to roll it out. Do we have the wrong stuff to roll out, or do we have to rebuild everything? Can you take a look at that, Magnus? I have done a lot of those kind of reviews over the last 3 years. And actually, my conclusion is always that you have learned a lot. It was a great investment, but you have to start from scratch because times have changed completely. You have a lot of exposures and rubbish in your entire network. So can you give some advice to companies who succeed in that situation? What would you tell them to do? First of all, would you ask them to throw out what they have? Is that a good start?
I don't know, maybe I should try to answer this. I mean, when we talk to our customers, the thing that you are referring to that kind of solves or help them solve this problem is how fast they actually can deploy and upload new models. Because previously you had these cycles of the cycle of uploading and developing a new model could be like 6-9 months, which becomes very, very imperative then that it's the right one, because otherwise it's pretty devastating. And you know, when we talk to them and say, now you can do it in minutes and hours, completely changes the whole ball game for them. They are not as reluctant and afraid of developing and deploying their models on their assets, because if it's not really right, they just upload a new one. It's not really a big thing. Another aspect in this regard that changed a lot during the last maybe 2 years or so, we have a feature called SA staging, where you actually simulate their products. So you deploy the models on a simulated product and see what happens. And then when they are satisfied with it, then they kind of deploy it on the real models, the real products. And that seems to be very, very interesting for a lot of test and verification people out there. But the problem you just said is I mean, of course, there's a parent minus out there. The question is how you handle it. And that's why I mentioned these two. I mean, the deployment time, and actually maybe you deploy them on simulated products instead before. It's one way to approach it.
Well, it's great to have those products available, but if you have a rusty car underneath, you know, maybe it's better to rebuild the car first. That's kind of what I'm alluding to, because, you know, if you started to build something typically in-house 10 years ago, you know, it's built on rubbish, and you had to do a lot of stuff and solve a lot of issues that's now more or less available in generic platforms and so forth. So if you're going to go from 5,000 deployed products to 500,000 deployed products, you're going to kill yourself. That's kind of my view. Aaron, you're in the middle of the doing. So what would you say?
Is that for me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Kamal was a good example, right? They actually, when we first approached Kamal, it was probably about 4 years ago, they actually went ahead and they said, you know, we want to have a small box. And they went ahead and hired this, you know, PCB design factory to build a box. They didn't have any software for it. So, I mean, when we approached them, we said, well, that was kind of stupid, right? That wasn't the best move. So what we did with them is we actually said, well, what do you guys want to do? What do you want to focus on? And that's when they said, look, we're AI people. We want to do models and so forth. So we came up with a suggestion, like in the case of our case, of taking the off-the-shelf Arduino, and they basically threw it away, right? And it's like, I mean, it's in terms of hardware, once you start building hardware, you got to make sure you're committed to it. Otherwise, it is going to be thrown away, right? And a lot of companies we've seen is that they make the decision about hardware first, rather than actually what about how we're going to build this, or what team do we actually have to work with this. I mean, there's no point building a great little device if you don't have a programmer there to program it, right? And like you said, with probably more on the cloud side, there's a lot of different services that now exist. So if you build something that's using some monolithic service, and there are great new services out there, like you got, you know, a lot of improvements now in terms of containerization and so forth, that could make a big difference. especially on the edge, if you've got more powerful environments, then you will do things completely different. So I think you're going to run into situations where it's going to depend. You can always analyze what they have and say, how much can you really keep? And, in the SAS case, we actually had a board that we said, look, you can keep that board. They had a mega before, so that's why we just kept it, because they weren't doing anything special. We said, look, we just make the communication better, and we solve that problem for you, give you the ability to update over the air rather than have to stick a USB cable every 3 months. But every customer is going to be different, and I think it's about analyzing what their needs are and then seeing how it fits. And of course, in regards to how your services are as well, of course, people are going to always try and want to sell their services on. But I mean, it's about being smart. I mean, if you try and sell ice to Eskimos, they're going to figure it out eventually, and it's not going to work. So you might as well be honest with people and say to them, this is not going to work, or you invested a lot of time, but think of it as a learning exercise.
Yeah. Joachim, do you have any experience or feelings about this?
Well, we don't try to throw away other stuff. We just try to be better than the existing stuff. But it's a little bit different from the other speakers' technology, I would say. But eventually, yeah, their solutions will come out of date. So retrofitting, as Niels and Jon also said, to make stupid things smarter. That's a key, of course, and also that's environmental friendly, I would say. But I would say that the new technology opens so much thoughts on how to proceed. So they will eventually leave the old stuff behind anyways. But that's tricky as well, because they don't really know what to do with it. Now I saw someone mention Combient here earlier. Sorry, I shouldn't have mentioned them, but I saw that they were only out for generative AI. And I cannot see any takers on the companies they run for that are, mature enough to understand what the generative AI can do for them. So at least they're trying. That's good.
Yeah. Any comments or questions or issues or proposals from the audience? Anyone out there? I know many of you. I know some people there have a lot of experience in this as well, but I don't want to chase you at all. So I think we'll leave you here. We have a good way before the end of the session. And I think that's always very good. So you have some more time to do things. Thank you so much for everyone joining.